Morning, LifePoint Church. If we've never met, my name is Brady, and I am an imperfect follower of Jesus, which I just get to discover more and more every day just how imperfect I am. Recently, the Spirit of God has been graciously revealing more and more of my pride in my heart. I've realized that if you're familiar with the great movie, what is the movie called? The one with all the emotions at the consoles. Thank you. Wow. Please, if anyone from the Disney campus of our church was watching, I apologize. I found out that in the movie Inside Out, they have these 5 different emotions that could be at your console. And I've realized that recently disgust has been at my console a lot, which means there's just a lot of pride in my heart as I look down upon other people who are worse than me and, in my mind at least. And it's like, yikes. You think after following Jesus for 30 some odd years, all of that would be done away with. And it's just ugly. But he's working on me. I'm a work in progress. And the good news is I'm in a community of other imperfect Jesus followers. And we're just trying to daily reorient our lives around Jesus and allowing him to transform us, being with him, becoming like him, and partner with him together. So this is a safe place to journey, to wrestle with our sin and our imperfection and brokenness. As I was thinking about things this morning, I was reminded about how I like to interact with smaller groups of people. So whether it's just a get together or a Bible study or life group or whatever it is, I love icebreaker questions because they kind of get people loosened up. If you're anything like me, I'm super introverted. I learned that more and more. In fact, the other day I was on this retreat with some people, and they had this reception where you were supposed to go and just hang out with people. And I walked over to the reception, and this is how messed up I am. I walked over, and they said, "Hey, this is so important. We really want everyone to be a part of it." I walked in. And then I walked out, and I went back to my room. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle being around a big group of 70 people that I didn't know. I just couldn't handle it. It was too much. Just had to leave. It's just kind of the way it is. So icebreaker questions kind of help people get out of that difficulty. And my favorite icebreaker questions are the ones that first make people think about themselves. Kind of think about, okay, wait, who am I? What's going on inside my heart, my mind? Think about my little quirks and idiosyncrasies that make up my personality. But then also allow others to begin to be invited into that. So one of my favorite icebreaker questions, I use it all the time, is this. If you think about your personality, all of the uniquenesses of your personality, and then you think about punctuation marks. So in English, we have a number of different punctuation marks, like a period, a question mark, exclamation point, quotations, a hyphen, all kind of things, colon, semicolon. If you relate your personality, which punctuation mark would best describe your personality? So just think about that for a second. Think about your personality, think about the punctuation marks. Are you a matter-of-fact person? Are you a period? It just is the way that it is. Do you tend to escalate? Do you tend to make things bigger than they normally are? Are you exclamation point? Is everything bigger than it really is in life, better or worse? Are you a mystery, right? Is there a mystery to you? Are you a question mark? What are you? What is your personality? One of my favorite answers that I've ever gotten was in a community that we had back in Florida. And this sweet girl, she said, my personality is an ellipses, which is the ... And the reason she said this is because she is super introverted. And not only is she super introverted, she's also beautiful. And as I'm sure you've had in your life, where you've experienced someone who was, whether they were good looking or powerful or successful or whatever, and introverted, it's easy to label them as stuck up, right? Because that's, if you're kind of to yourself, and yet you have this thing that people kind of look to and want to be a part of and near, it's easy to say, oh, that person's stuck up. And so she said, I'm an ellipses because I want to say to everyone, but wait, there's more. Don't you love that? But wait, there's more. Like it's not that the stuff that just happened that you experienced was untrue. It's real, but there's so much more, and I don't want that to put you off. I don't want that to cause you to run away from me. But wait, there's more, which is what I wanted to say to everyone as I left the thing the other night. Hey, it's okay. Wait, there's more. There's more to me. And what I love about that is I think it accurately displays God and his character. Whatever you learn about God, whatever aspect of God that you see, whatever level of his goodness, his greatness, his majesty, his glory, his beauty, his grace, his love, whatever it is that you see, there's more. You will never get to the depths of who God is. There is always more depth to be had, more beauty to be grasped, more of his love to experience. And the same is true of his scriptures. I love what Tim Mackey says about the Hebrew scriptures. He calls them Jewish meditation literature because they're intended to be read over and over and over and over. They're intended to be thought about, to be chewed on, to be meditated on, to be, have discussions about them, questioned. That's what they're for. Because every time you read them, when you read them in that way, you will discover more. There's always more beauty to be had. And I think as we've gone through Matthew, there have been a number of times where we've gotten to see this. How you see something on the surface and you think, oh, that's cool. And then you see it on another level and you think, oh, I had no idea that was there. And then you see it on another level, you're like, what? Really? 3 levels down? It's Inception, right? You're like, which dream level are we on? I don't even know where we're at. But, that's what we see in the scriptures. And today is no different. If you want to grab your Bible, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 20, and just like always, we'll be all over the Bible as well. But what happens here is really neat. Jesus, over the last few weeks, he's begun to do what I would call playing a theme. So if you are watching an epic movie of some sort, what you'll have, if they've hired a good composer, and if there's a very good director, is what he or she will have done is placed a theme, a melody throughout the movie at very specific times that will not only make you invest fully in that moment, but it will call you back to other moments in the movie, and it really connects things very well. And I think about it in terms of Star Wars, obviously. Right? And there's this moment in A New Hope, which was the first one that came on the screens, where Luke is on his hometown, is on his home planet of Tatooine, and he is at his homestead, and he's looking over the sunset of the twin suns. And then you hear the theme of the Force playing in the background. Something like, dun, dun, da, da, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Remember, like, are you feeling it? Are you hearing it? And you're right there, right? And then what happens is throughout that movie, it comes back up in these pivotal moments, like at the end when he's fighting against the Death Star, and the Death Star is about to be, in the place where it can destroy the rebel base. And Luke, he's flying in his X-wing fighter, and he's got to fire these photon torpedoes down into this shaft to explode the Death Star, and everyone has missed, and he's got his guidance computer on, and then all of a sudden he hears Obi-Wan's voice telling him to remove the guidance computer and just trust his feelings. And you hear, dun, dun, da, da, dun, dun. And then after they've had the victory, once again, the theme is played again. John Williams, this beautiful theme is played again, in this magnificent, they're all getting pinned with their awards, except for Chewbacca, obviously. I don't know why he got excluded. Maybe it's because he wasn't wearing any clothes, just fur. Who knows? But still, you hear that again. And then the next episode, right? Empire Strikes Back, when Luke has been captured by this, creature, the Wampa on the ice world of Hoth, and he's hanging upside down. His feet are stuck in ice. He's about to be killed, and he has to reach out and with the Force grab his lightsaber. Like, it's too far. He can't reach. He has to use the Force, and you hear, dun, dun, da, da, da. Right, you hear it again. And then when he's looking for the great Jedi Master who will train him, the great Jedi Master Yoda, and he's like with this crazy little green creature who's odd and talks strangely, and he's like, who are you? And all of a sudden, Yoda uses the Force, and you hear it again. You hear it when Luke is calling out to Leia to save him after he's gotten a hand chopped off by his dad. Who knew? It's played again in episode 6 when Darth Vader finally changes, when he finally turns back to the light and helps Luke out and kills the emperor. And at the very end, when Luke is burning the symbol of his dad's false self, that helmet, that mask, you hear it play once again. And then you hear it throughout the rest of the series. You hear it, on the Clone Wars. You hear it just throughout. And it's just beautiful. And it brings back all these memories, all these thoughts, this beautiful melody of hope in the midst of some of the most dark and difficult times. And in the same way, Jesus begins to take this theme and weave it in the most important moments. And we've seen it just recently. Not only did Jesus begin by announcing the kingdom and then teaching about the kingdom, then bringing the kingdom into people's lives, then he began to stake his flag in the ground, saying, my kingdom's going to come, and it's going to stand against all powers and all authority. I don't care who you are. And so right there, Caesarea Philippi, when he's announced as the Messiah at the gates of hell, in this powerful, epic moment, he says, I don't want you to misunderstand this moment. Matthew chapter 16, verse 21, it says, from that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. I'm sure the disciples were shocked. Like, what, this huge moment now you're talking about, what? What's going on? And then he goes up on the mountain of transfiguration, and he is transfigured before them. Moses and Elijah show up. God speaks from the clouds. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. And on the way down the mountain, Jesus weaves in this theme once again. 17, verse 9. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. And the disciples asked him, then why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come? And he answered, Elijah does come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, speaking of John the Baptist. And they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. They imprisoned him. Herod cut off his head. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands. Did you hear it again? Did you hear it play again? He comes down the mountain and he encounters this demon possession, right? Obviously the powers, the demonic spiritual powers don't want Jesus to bring his kingdom into this planet that they have ruled and reigned. And so there's this confrontation. And Jesus casts out this demon out of this boy. And once again, he plays the theme. As they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day. And they were greatly distressed. And Jesus begins to teach about pride in the community. He says, here's what you do when sin begins to corrupt the community. You need to deal with your own sin and take it seriously. And then you need to forgive one another. You need to have grace for one another because God has had grace for you. And he encounters a rich young ruler who's been enslaved to his money, didn't even know it. And Jesus helps to expose that. And he says, hey, you need to sell all you have and come follow me. And then Peter gets nervous. He speaks up. He's like, Jesus, we've left everything. What are we going to get? And Jesus, being kind and gracious, says, hey, don't worry. You guys, you're going to sit on thrones with me. We're going to have thrones set up, and you will rule with me on these thrones. Now remember that. This is going to come back today. And then Jesus tells this parable about God's audacious grace. His unmerited grace, but his grace that's even offensive. And Chris talked about that last week. That yes, we want God's grace, but when he gives it to other people, sometimes we don't like it because it doesn't seem fair. Because they don't get what they deserve. We're thankful when we don't get what we deserve, but we don't like it sometimes when others don't get what they deserve. For us, we want grace. For others, we want justice. But God gives us better than fair. And Jesus lets us know what's going on. And then once again, here we go. And this is today's passage. Jesus lights up that theme in our minds. Chapter 20, verse 17. And as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, going up to Jerusalem. You're going to begin to picture in your mind, the Palm Sunday. He comes into Jerusalem on a donkey. People are laying their cloaks on the ground so the donkey can walk on them. They're waving palm branches, crying out, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And their minds are brought back to Solomon coming down to rule and reign over Israel. As they were going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 aside. And on the way he said to them, see, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and he will be raised on the third day. Now, at some point, you begin to ask the question, why does Jesus keep playing this theme over and over and over again? And why at these moments? Why in these moments of greatness? Why in these moments of power? Why in these moments of authority does Jesus say, hey, remember, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be mocked. I'm going to be beaten. I'm going to be killed. Why does he continue to play that theme in these moments? Why, as he's going up to Jerusalem, like in these things, these crazy, amazing things are going to happen, does he make sure the 12 know, hey, you need to know, I'm going here and I'm going to be killed? Because he wants to make sure that they don't miss what's actually going on, although they continue to miss it. Because when we think of greatness, when we think of glory, when we think of success, when we think of honor, when we think of power, we think of being on a throne and everybody bowing to that person on that throne. We think that is glory, that is greatness, that is success, and we want that. And so Jesus makes sure that at each of those moments when we see these things that we think, oh, that's glory. At the gates of hell being proclaimed the Messiah. On the Mount of Transfiguration being transfigured, being with Moses and Elijah. That's glory. When he casts out a demon and it shows power over the principalities and the demonic forces of this world, that's glory. But Jesus wants us to see something different. And so once again, he plays this theme. Now, chapter 20, verse 20, then. And whenever you see a word then in the scriptures, you need to know this is tied to what was just said. That wasn't something different that just happened. Matthew wants us to be clear that these two things are connected. Jesus telling the disciples, hey, I'm going to suffer and die. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, two of his closest, came up to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, what do you want? And she said, say that these two sons of mine, James and John, are to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in the kingdom. Remember Jesus talked about the thrones? He was with the 12, and he said, y'all will sit on 12 thrones. And so what do these two think? They think, that's not enough. I don't just want to sit on one of 12 thrones. I want to sit on the two best thrones, one on your right and one on your left, right? The two closest to Jesus. I mean, Jesus, if you were going to be glorified higher than everyone, I want to be as close to you as possible to get the most glory that I can possibly get. So, hey, Mom, would you mind asking Jesus for us? And so the mom asks for them. And we know this, that they're looking for glory, because the way that Jesus says it in Mark chapter 10, verse 37 is this. They said to him, grant us to sit one at your right hand, one at your left in your glory. So in your kingdom, they are thinking glory. They are thinking throne. They're thinking when, like the Son of Man passages, Jesus coming on a cloud and everyone worshiping him, everyone bowing to him. He's already conquered all the nations. It's all under his feet, the authority. That's glory. That's what they're thinking. We want that, Jesus. Let us sit at your right and your left. That's the moment they're thinking, this moment of greatness, grandeur, majesty. And here's what Jesus says, verse 22. Jesus answered, you don't know what you're asking. Have you ever felt like that? Typically when you're more mature and someone who's less mature asks you a question, you're like, you don't know what you're asking. You have no idea what you're asking. That's what Jesus said to them. You have no idea what you're asking. And then he says, are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? And they said to him, we are able. Now, what's this cup about? What's this cup? Now, maybe you're picturing when a king is sitting on his throne and his cupbearer brings this giant chalice that's, beautifully decorated in gold and jewels, and there's the most amazing liquid in it ever, root beer, obviously. And he just drinks from that glorious cup. That's not what Jesus is talking about. That's not what Jesus is talking about. He's referring back to Jeremiah chapter 25. In Jeremiah chapter 25, God is speaking through the prophet Jeremiah, talking to all of these nations. Here's what he says. It says in verse 15, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, said to me, take from my hand this cup of the wine of wrath. Take from my hand this cup of the wine of wrath and make all the nations to whom I send you to drink it. They shall drink and stagger and be crazed because of the sword that I'm sending among them. Now, what he's talking about is there are all these nations, all of these empires that have become so corrupt, so sinful, so rebellious that in Daniel's dream they are pictured as these awful mutant beasts. That when humanity has given in to their sins so much, humanity no longer looks like the image bearers of God that he created them to be, ruling over the animals on the earth. Instead, we have descended and become just like beasts ourselves, killing one another, devouring one another with our sin and our rebellion. And so God says, now you have stored up your own wrath. Now I want you to drink it. And then, in case the people of Israel thought that they were getting off scot-free, verse 28, and if they refuse to accept the cup from your hand to drink, then you'll say to him, then thus says the Lord of hosts, you must drink. For behold, I begin to work disaster at the city that is called by my name. That would be his own city, Jerusalem. It's built on Mount Zion. And shall you go unpunished? Right? If I'm going to start with my own people, shall you go unpunished? You shall not go unpunished, for I am summoning the sword against all inhabitants of the earth, declares the Lord of hosts. This is the cup of God's wrath that Jesus is talking about. Now, when we think about God's wrath, oftentimes I, at least, misunderstand what's being said. And when you look at Romans chapter 1, Paul defines what God's wrath is. And the way that Paul defines God's wrath is not God striking everyone with lightning, but God allowing humanity to reap the own consequences of their sin. See, the natural byproduct of sin is death. When I sin, I tend to think like, oh, it's kind of good, it's kind of nice, it feels fun, it's exciting. Sin, depending on what it is, can feel really good. Like, have you ever gossiped about someone and you just felt good? Get it off your chest, It felt so good to tell someone else what it was. And greed, man, when you buy the newest tech gadget, even though you have the latest iteration, you don't need a new one, it feels good for a second, right? There's a reason we call it retail therapy, right? It feels good for a second. Lust, so fun. And we think sin is good, but God says don't do it, so he's just a fun hater. And what God is trying to tell us, what Paul is showing us is no. When you engage in sinful behavior, it leads to corruption inside yourself. It hurts you. Over time, it will destroy you. And we see it in terms of addiction. We talk about addiction. Like as you give in to sin over and over and over, at some point you become addicted and it owns your life. And it begins to destroy your own life. And that's just a taste of the natural byproducts of our sin. And God's wrath is when he says, if you want to rebel against me, if you want to make your own choices, if you want to go your own way, okay, go your own way. I'm going to let you go your own way. And I'm going to allow you to begin to experience some of the natural consequences of your sin. That's God's wrath. His wrath is allowing us to go and live our own way that is not in accordance with his good and perfect will. And so you see the nations who've become so violent, so rebellious, so corruptive, God saying, I'm going to allow you to drink the cup of your own wrath. We talked about it before when we were talking about Gehenna. Gehenna, a word that sometimes is translated as hell in our New Testament. Gehenna was this valley where Israel, God's own people, had rebelled so awfully against God, they'd begun to worship the god Molech in this valley by lighting these fires and casting their children into the fires and burning them in worship to this other god. See, they lit the fires of Gehenna. So when Jesus talks about the fires of Gehenna, the fires of hell, they're the fires that we lit for ourselves. And sometimes God allows us to experience the natural byproduct, the natural consequences of our own rebellion, and that's his wrath. And so you see in Jeremiah, God saying, I'm going to allow you to drink your own wrath. And I'm going to start with my own people. You deserve it because that's what you have chosen. I'm going to allow and pour out all that wrath on you. So who is supposed to drink the wrath for their sin? We are. That's what it said in Jeremiah. All of the nations are going to drink it. But what did Jesus say? Jesus said, are you able to drink the cup that I'm going to drink? And the first thing here that is so beautiful is that Jesus says, I'm going to take that cup of wrath that you should be drinking for your rebellion, for your sin, for you corrupting your own community, becoming like a mutant beast. I am going to drink that on your behalf because that is the love of God for humanity. That Jesus is going to take the cup of wrath that we deserve to drink because we have lit it on fire. And Jesus is going to take that and drink it himself. And Jesus says to James and John, verse 23, he says, you will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those to whom it has been prepared by my Father. To sit at my right and my left is already prepared. What's he talking about? See, they're picturing in their mind this glorious throne. Everyone's worshiping. He's already conquered, and they are sitting next to him. But Jesus has a very different picture in his mind. And the first bit of this gets revealed when he's been arrested and he's standing before the high priest on trial. Okay, so now let's fast forward to the night he's going to die, right? He's been betrayed by Judas. He's been taken from the Garden of Gethsemane, arrested. Now he's on trial before the high priest. Matthew 26, verse 63. But Jesus remained silent. The high priest is questioning him. He's asking him all these questions, trying to trip him up, get him to say something that he can condemn him to death for. And the high priest said to Jesus, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ or the Messiah, the anointed king, the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. We've talked about this before. This is the imagery from Daniel, his dream that he had about the Son of Man coming on the clouds. There's God sitting on a throne, but there's an empty throne, a throne that was meant for humanity to rule with God, but humanity couldn't do it. They continued to rebel against God. There's no human that was good enough. And so now, Jesus, this divine God himself, become human, who lived the perfect sinless life, is invited up onto that throne, right? So Jesus is invoking this imagery, showing him that he is the Son of Man that was prophesied, the Messiah, the anointed king. He says, yes, I am him. But what did he say to the high priest? He says, you're going to see this happen. But when did he say you're going to see this happen? He said, from now on. From now, at this moment on. Now, he's on trial at the house of the high priest. What happens next? What happens now and then on? Well, they condemn him to death. They start punching him in the face. They spit on him. They mock him. They take him to Pilate. He gets, once again, condemned to death. He gets beaten. He gets scourged. He gets whipped with 39 lashes. He gets a purple robe around him as they mock him. They put a crown of thorns onto his head. They mock him. They force him to carry his own cross up on the hill, up to Golgotha. And then he is raised up on a cross and crucified. From now on, you will see me in this glorious way as the Son of Man. And in Jesus' mind, this is that path to glory. When did they see him raised up in the clouds? On the top of Golgotha, raised up on the cross. See, they think of Jesus' throne of glory as this something in the clouds, something ethereal. God has already, taken all the rebellion of humanity and they're worshiping him. But Jesus sees it very differently. And we see this even more. Verse 35 of Matthew chapter 27, it says, when they had crucified him. So they now crucified Jesus. And over his head, they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. There's 3 places where this phrase is used in the scripture. One, when the disciples come to Jesus and say, "I want to be on your right and on your left, on your thrones in glory." The second is when Jesus says, "It's already been prepared for the people to sit on my right and on my left in my glory." And then here, when Jesus is raised up on his throne of glory and they are seated on his right and on his left. See, we think, first of all, that Jesus on the cross is only the transaction that has to take place where the perfect spotless lamb takes away our sin and drinks the cup of God's wrath so that we can be invited into his family. It is that. But it's more than that. See, Jesus' dissension from trial to beating to mocking to torture to death on the cross, that is his path to glory. But it's not just his path to glory. It's not just he does this and so therefore God will next glorify him. The way that Jesus sees it and the way that Matthew is portraying it is, no. The cross is not his means to glory. Jesus sees this cross is his glory. That in the way of the kingdom of heaven, this path of carrying his cross, of descending into humility and submission and servanthood and torture and death, that is his glory. Because it's this upside down kingdom. Jesus believed his enthronement in glory is the cross itself. And then, chapter 20, verse 24, back in our story today, when the 10 heard it, so the 2, James and John, went to Jesus, and then there's 10 others who didn't ask the question. When they heard that they had asked that question about the right and the left, they were indignant at the 2 brothers. Why? Because they wish they had thought of it. Dang it, Jesus, we wanted to be on your right and your left, but now we're just going to be on thrones with you. Man! James and John, When they heard it, they were indignant at the 2 brothers. But Jesus called to them and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles, those who don't follow Jesus, lord it over them. And their great ones exercise authority over them. He says, look at the power structures of the world. Look at Rome. Look at the way it works. Rome is in power and they are stepping on you to get there. Rome is wealthy because they're taxing you into poverty, right? Rome has glory because you have none. That's how those outside of the kingdom of heaven do it. But the way of the kingdom of heaven is completely different. There was a study that was done recently. There was a guy from Berkeley and another guy from Cornell, and they did this study where, first of all, they gathered all of this research that had been done about the human desire for glory, for success, for greatness. And just looked at all the research, and it clearly shows that all of us, there's just this inborn tendency in all of us to want greatness, to want glory, to want success, to want people to look at us and say we're awesome, to think we're awesome, to think we're beautiful or wealthy or powerful or respect us, whatever that is, we all want it in some way, shape, or form. But they wanted to do some further research to find out, is this desire competitive in its nature? And basically, here's what they did. If you could measure success in numbers, and let's say, you could have greatness and glory and success in numbers up to 100. And 100 would be all of the success. It'd be all the glory. It'd be all the greatness. That's having it all. And 0 would be having none. If you could choose between these two options, option 1, all of us here, everyone gets 90 success. Every one of us gets 90 glory. That's a lot, right? You can have that scenario where every single one of us gets 90, or you can have a scenario where you get 70 and everyone else gets 50. Which would you choose? Now you think you would choose, 90 is more than 70, and I would get 90 rather than 70, so I want the scenario where everyone gets 90. But that's not the case. Consistently, over and over and over, everyone chose the scenario where they would have less as long as they had more than everybody else. That is the shape of the human heart in sin. Although this study was recent, I think Dr. Seuss a long time ago got it in his great story about Yertle the turtle. I don't know if you've read that. We read it over and over growing up. But there's the king of all the turtles in this pond. His name is Yertle. And he's sitting up on his high rock throne. And he sees there's something above him. He says, my throne needs to be higher. So he calls a few turtles to stand on this rock. And then he stands on them. They make his throne higher for him. And then there's still things that are higher. And so he calls finally all of the turtles in the pond from other ponds to come over and to raise up his throne so his throne is higher. Because the way that we function as humans is this. We don't just want glory. We don't just want greatness. We don't just want success. We want more than the other person. And what we do is we climb on the rungs of the ladder to success, but the rungs of the ladder to success are other people. We want to climb on top of other people to get greater, to get more, to get wealthier, to get more power. And we want to use people as the means, as the rungs that we climb over to get there. Jesus says that's the way of humanity. That's the way of this world. That's the way of sin. That's the way of corruption, and it doesn't work. And then he says this in verse 26, it shall not be so among you. For whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. For Jesus, in his mind, the cross was not simply the transaction that had to take place so that we could be invited into the kingdom. And it wasn't simply his path to glory. The cross was his glory. The cross was his glory. Because the way of the kingdom of heaven is an upside down kingdom. We see it beautifully in the Last Supper. At the Last Supper, another argument arises amongst the disciples is, who's the greatest? And we don't know the exact timeline, but in my mind, what makes most sense is that the very next thing that happens is Jesus stands up from the table, and it says at this point he knows that God has given everything into his hands. So now he has all authority, and the first thing he does, knowing he has all authority, is he wraps a towel around his waist. He gets down and begins to wash his disciples' feet. Because once again, he wants to play that theme of the way of glory, the way of greatness, the way of majesty in the kingdom is the way of submission, of sacrifice, of serving. It's the way of saying no to what I deserve so that you can have your good. It's the way of saying no to what I want or what I desire so that you can have what is good. Rather than building a ladder of other people as the rungs to climb up to greatness, the way of the kingdom of heaven is the opposite. It's you saying, I'm going to be a rung on your ladder to help you into greatness. I'm going to be a rung in your ladder to help you into beauty. I'm going to be a rung on your ladder to help you into glory. That is the way of the kingdom, the way of the cross, the way of Jesus, the way he calls all of us into. Jesus, although he was God, did not count equality with God something to cling to. Instead, he emptied himself and became a human and became a servant and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. And then he calls all of us to walk in that way. And I tell you what, it would have been enough for Jesus to die so that I could be invited into the kingdom. That would have been enough. But wait, there's more. His path to the cross demonstrates for us the path of glory. His path to the cross, being raised up on the cross, is his glory, showing us the better way, the only way that it works. Because in our way, only a few can have glory and everyone else have to be stepped on. But in the way of the kingdom, everyone can be raised up and be given grace upon grace upon grace upon grace, can share in the inheritance with Jesus. And that would have been enough for him just to show us the way. But he doesn't stop there, because he knows that my heart is not capable of living that way. It's a heart of stone. And so he gives me a heart of flesh. And he doesn't stop there. He gives me the Spirit of God who's going to walk me into maturity. And I know this because the exact same disciples who said, "Who's the greatest, Jesus?" It's probably me. So just go ahead and tell everyone. The same disciple, Peter, who said, "What do we get, Jesus? We've given everything." The same two disciples, James and John, who said, "We want to sit on your right and on your left." Those same disciples, at the end of their lives, had been so transformed by the power of the Spirit of God, so matured by Jesus walking them into sanctification, that they all gave up their lives for others in the kingdom. Peter famously saying, "Hey, I'm not even worthy to be crucified like Jesus. Crucify me upside down. I'm not even worthy to share his glory on the cross in the way that he did it, so do it differently. I can't do it." And if there's hope for those guys, there's hope for me, and there's hope for you, and there's hope for our community. There's hope for the kingdom of heaven that elevates others, because when all of us have a cross-shaped heart and we view others through the lens of Jesus, and we all desire to be a rung on the ladder for someone else to be raised up, then there is great beauty in the family of God. And we begin this movement, this epic movement that changes the world.